Hello everyone, it's Unmade2009 here, and welcome to part 6 of Thomas and Friends What Ifs, where I go through your comments and give you my thoughts. So let's get into it. The first one from Gubnum is, what if Toho bought Thomas? If this happened, then Thomas would be an anime, which could have been cool, but it really would not suit Thomas. The fandom would not be happy about this. The next one from George Roberts is, what if All Engines Go never happened? If this happened, Bwabba could possibly still be happening today, which I would definitely rather than All Engines Go, but it would probably just become worse over time. If Thomas simply ended with Series 24 with no new Thomas show whatsoever, Mattel probably wouldn't have done much for the 80th anniversary with Thomas making no money. CRA19 asked, what if Neville returned in Series 20 instead of Bulgy? Bulgy actually returned in Series 21, but I'm sure that's what he meant here. If Unscheduled Stops ended with Neville returning instead of Bulgy, then that would possibly be the most random return ever. But if a completely different story happened, then that would make a lot more sense. Neville is a very random character, but I would definitely like to see him return. I do think he had a lot of wasted potential. The Skyline Railway Studios asked, what if Thomas ended after Blue Mountain Mystery? Before Blue Mountain Mystery came out, Thomas and Friends was on its deathbed. It wouldn't have been much of a shock to see the show get cancelled at this point. I think fans would have been happy that Thomas went out on a good note though. Maximum asked, what if Boca returned to All Engines Go? I really appreciate the amount of returnees that All Engines Go had, even though I don't like All Engines Go. It would make me really happy if Mattel brought Boca back even for All Engines Go, even if it was just a fan service. Avery Productions asked, what if Thomas and Friends was bought by Sega? There probably wouldn't be much show, and I don't think fans would be very happy about this, but there probably would be a lot more Thomas video games. We could definitely see some kind of Team Blue Sonic Thomas crossover here. Robert Tracy asked, what if David Mitten's Thomas movie got made? There is very little information about this. It would have come out instead of Magic Railroad around the same time. One thing I am sure about this is that the Tugs characters would have appeared. Jay the Train Fan asked, what if Mattel never owned All Engines Go? You'd think that any other company would just cancel it if no one liked it. So if some other company owned All Engines Go, it'd probably have been cancelled very quickly and replaced with some other reboot instead. Xavier's K&Y Studios asked, what if Donald, Douglas or Oliver had been part of the Steam team? I would love to have seen this. However, if all four of them are part of the Steam team, the gender ratio would be 11:1. So we probably would have gotten some new female characters on the Steam team as well. Molly and Rosie would eventually join as well. Perhaps in Calling All Engines, Tim the Shed's could have been rebuilt with maybe 15 berths or something crazy. Shimia TM asked, what if David Tennant was a narrator for Series 5 and 6 as well as becoming Mr. Conductor in Thomas and the Magic Railroad? This is before he was in Doctor Who, so he wasn't that well known. This would have to have been in the UK instead of the US though. But if he was Mr. Conductor, this would have been really weird for the US audience, because David Tennant was not known in America. Liam Silky had a few. The first one was, what if Rosie and Molly joined the Steam team? This would have potentially solved the huge gender imbalance, but it only would have worked if they didn't kick out any of the already existing Steam team members. I know that a lot of people thought that Molly was part of the Steam team, mainly just parents though, and also that it was planned for Rosie to join the Steam team after Series 21 originally. The second one was, what if Thomas ended after Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure? This would have been a great way for the show to go out on, but I think fans would have been really disappointed because Thomas had finally started to get good again. The third one was, what if Hero of the Rails was made with models? Murdoch's prop would have to been modified into Hero, and Sir Handels into Victor. I think there would have been a lot more characters because the cast was reduced because Nitrogen Studios didn't have enough time to remake every character in CGI. The film wouldn't be known as the grand switch to CGI, but I think the film could have actually been better. Bobby Productions asked, what if Diesel did get away with what he did in the Railway series and never got found out? I think this is the first question someone's asked is actually about the story and not the behind the scenes. If this happened, Duck would become faded away into the background and eventually forgotten about. Diesel would slowly do the same thing with each of the other engines, until the Fat Controller had to get new diesel engines to replace them. Diesels would then rule Sodor, and it would be just as up to date as the rest of BR, which was Diesel's plan all along. LeCavian Davis, vlogger, had a few. The first one was, what if Thomas and the Magic Railroad got a remake? This would have to have been in CGI for the same reasons why the show switched to CGI. If this came out, I don't think it would do that well though. It would still be cool to see, of course, unless it was All Engines Go-ified. The second one was, what if Pierce Broadway narrated series 22 and 24? I assume you mean Pierce Brosnan here because I couldn't find anyone called Pierce Broadway. If Brosnan simply just returned, it would have been very strange because he left the show 10 years before. And also Bobber didn't even have a narrator. Because Thomas doesn't really count though. Don't really know what else to say about this one. The third one was, what if Stanley joined the Steam team? I have a feeling that this was planned to happen at one point, explaining as to why he was in the roll call of The Great Discovery. If this happened, then the lyric "Stanley, he's the new one" there would continue into Series 12. Unless they rebooked him with Sheds again, Stanley would have to say somewhere else. But this would have been really good in the CGI series because Stanley was nothing but a background character and he really deserved more. The fourth one was, what if Alec Baldwin returned to narrate Thomas? If he did come back, the way he was in Series 5, I think everyone would absolutely love it. But if he returned the way he was in Series 6, everyone would still be glad to see him back, although he wasn't very good in Series 6. Ketley Apollon had a few. The first one was, what if Tugs was successful? It would never be as successful as Thomas, but if it had been successful it probably would have ran straight through the 90s and would have played a part in Magic Railroad. If it was still popular at this point, it probably would have run until 2002 or 3, when David Mitton retired from Thomas. It probably wouldn't have been picked up afterwards. The second one was, what if Thomas, instead of being for all engines, was for teens and adults only? I think it would be a lot more violent and inappropriate. However, the ratio of children who like Thomas and adult fans is very uneven, and not many people would watch it. If the show just randomly changed like this, I think everyone would be very confused by this change. The third one was, what if Hasbro purchased Thomas in 2017? If this happened, then Bobber would never exist, and Thomas would have been rebooted. But this reboot probably wouldn't be very good. The fourth one is, what if the props and CGI models were more Railway series accurate? The character designs would be a lot more complex, but if the show started like this, then Audrey would have been even more pleased with the show. The fifth one was, what if everyone understood that Thomas is for all ages? If this happened, then more people would watch the show and it would be a lot more successful, and I wouldn't have to hide the fact that I love Thomas and wouldn't get made fun about it. The sixth one was, what if Thomas had a voice cast since day one? The role of narrator would never have been so significant. I also think it would have been interesting to see about which actors could voice each character. A question I came up with the other day, which character would suit Stephen Fry as their voice actor? I think he'd be great in Thomas. The Nintendo Beatle 8002 asked, what if Ringo Starr narrated the remainder of the classic series of TTTE? It would have been very expensive, but it would have been cool to see. Although if Michelangelos just picked up with Series 8 with his much duller narration, he wouldn't have been known to be as good with no golden age of his narration. If Ringo stayed, then perhaps he would have stayed US narrator too. He could have played Mr. Conductor in Magic Railroad, which would have been very expensive, but still very interesting to see. Christopher Long asked, what if Sony owned Thomas? Thomas would get some kind of reboot. If Sony owned Thomas, I could see them making some kind of theatrical Thomas movie. And the last one we'll be answering today is from Aidan Mallender, who asked, what if Splatter, Dodge and Dennis returned to Day of the Diesels? I would have loved this. I'd probably prefer Day of the Diesels because I would love to have seen Dennis again. This film probably would feel more like a sequel to Magic Railroad with Splatter and Dodge returning. And that is everything we'll be covering in this video. Again, if your comment wasn't featured, it will be featured in a later video. And with that, I want to thank all of you for watching, see you in the next video, and goodbye for now.